Thanks for sitting with us, John. It's a real pleasure.
It's my pleasure. The only thing I really ever have to talk about, although I talk about a lot of things, and as I said, I ramble a lot, but the only thing I really have to talk about is this simple mental act that I speak of. And since it is so simple, and since it requires no particular understanding or insight or belief structure or anything whatsoever to perform it, to actually accomplish it, I have begun to, whenever I speak to anyone, whether in an interview or in a meeting or whatever, the first thing I want to do is for us to do this simple act. Just you and me and whoever ends up viewing this, to do the simple act so that my conversation with you as we proceed with the interview will be in the context of this act rather than whatever context might spontaneously arise.
Okay.
I call the act looking at yourself. And that pretty much is what it does, what it is. It's a mental act. It's an act of the concentration of consciousness, trying to get a direct, immediate, split-second taste of what it actually feels like to be you. Not self, not consciousness, not ego, not any of those things, but just you. Now, it is certainly the case that we all, growing up human beings, excuse me, it's certainly the case that we have all been mistaken in many different ways about just what it is that we refer to when we say me. We've mistaken ourselves for our thoughts, our body, our consciousness. We've mistaken ourselves for a whole bunch of things over time when we think about what I talk about when I say me. But although we've made those mistakes doesn't change the fact that there is present here in this moment a sense that I am here, a sense of me here. That sense of me here is almost never consciously touched. In fact, it is, for a lot of reasons that we may or may not talk about, avoided, pretty much like the plague. So what I ask people to do is to, and there's no particular technique to this, it's too simple to really lend itself to a technique. All I'm asking is that we bring the beam of our attention in direct contact with the actual feeling sensation of me, just me. And usually the way we start is by, even though we know these things to be the case already, by reminding ourselves of the fact that the most important thing in this entire act is the actuality that we do have the power to focus attention and to place it where we want to put it. That is, to me, it's indisputable. So usually I start, and we don't have to go through a big rigmarole here, but usually I start with us just sitting here quietly and entering into a very brief mindfulness meditation. And what I mean when I speak of mindfulness meditation is that we either with our eyes open or our eyes closed, we bring our attention deliberately by choice to the feel of the breath as it comes in and out of the body. And we try to count the breaths as we're watching them. Now, it is to be expected, and it is actually trivial to note, that it's easy to lose that intent, that attention is naturally drawn away to things that move and make noise and things of that nature. And that's okay, because the purpose of the meditation itself is not to succeed. but simply to notice that I actually can do that. So let's just sit for just a minute or two and see if we could count our breaths, watch our breaths. When the tension is pulled away, we just note when we notice that we're not attending to that, we just notice that we're not attending to it and bring our attention back to the breath and start over.
Okay.
So let's just do that for just a couple minutes. I'll pay attention. Okay. Now, of course, when we do this, it takes some effort. It takes some intent to focus attention. It takes some time to notice what it is we're actually trying to look at, what it feels like, and then some time to actually settle into the paying attention to it. And if we're distracted from it, we go through the similar process again, reestablishing that contact. Now the same is true for what I want to do now, which is just for a very brief time, 30 seconds maybe, see if we can find the direct experience of what your tongue feels like as it rests in your mouth, relaxed, just that. Again, it took a moment to understand what we're looking at, and then a little bit of time to settle into it and so forth. But in both cases, we had the capacity to do so. We could choose to put our attention there, on the tongue or on the breath, wherever we wanted to, once we figured out what it was that we were actually trying to experience. In the same way, nothing more complicated than that simple human capacity to move attention around. In the same way, I want us to see if we cannot, with that same sort of attention, feel the direct, unmediated, and very simple feeling of me here. Just that, just for a second, just Now in this effort, it's not even as simple as it is in the other cases, probably because it's too simple. What I'm asking us to get a direct conscious taste of is you. And you're here all the time. And you don't do anything. You don't have any quality other than the fact that you feel like you. That's your only quality. It's the only thing here that's identifiable as you. You also are everywhere here. You're in the background of every experience whatsoever here. So that the very fact of the spread of your presence here, the ubiquitousness of your presence here, makes it difficult also for us to focus attention on that feeling, the feeling itself being so tenuous and it being everywhere at the same time makes that difficult. Sometimes the effort pays off. Never is it possible to stay with the feeling of me for very long. It really isn't. I suspect that the reason for that is that A, I'm not very interesting. The feeling of me isn't very interesting. It's here all the time. And B, because the whole purpose of this power of being able to concentrate and move attention, the whole purpose of it is to look outward. Keep an eye on what's happening. Keep an eye on a rising experience. Keep an eye on what's coming in. What was here a little while ago, what might be here a little while from now, so that actually to try to get a direct taste. The amazing thing about this act is, though, that, and it seems almost self-evident, that you can't fail. You can fail to notice that you have actually made that contact, but you can't fail to touch yourself with your own attention. It's just not, it's absurd to think that it's possible. Now what we've found, and this is all there is to it, this is the entirety of what I have to offer people, what we just did here. And what we have found, and this is something that continues to take me by surprise, is that almost without exception, and as time goes on we'll see, what, you can talk to me some other time in the future and tell me about this, but almost without exception, once that act is taken in the way we just did now, whether you felt like you succeeded or didn't succeed, whether you felt like there was anything to it or not to it, once the effort is made, a couple things begin to happen. One is that you'll find yourself drawn to it, not necessarily with any particular discipline to it, but just throughout the course of your day or your week or whatever, you'll find yourself drawn to it from time to time. Just, oh, what was that? What is that anyway? That seems to be consistently the case. The other thing is that, and this is the part that's really difficult to believe, and which is why I don't ask anybody to really believe it, but simply to do the act and find out. What happens is that the background feeling of a slight murmur of anxiety and discontent and disaffection with life, the sense that there's something wrong, that something needs to be done about. And it's not a big deal, it's a really minor little thing running in the background. That goes away. You don't notice it right away, but it goes away. And as that goes away, something begins happening to the psychology. The neurotic traits and reactive behaviors begin just not to appear. It's not like some great light is shed on them and they are seen through and some great insight produces understanding in the light. They just don't show up anymore. Over a period of time, and for some the period of time is long, for some it's short, for some it's quite difficult, because what seems to be happening is that the whole apparatus that has come into being to protect us from our own lives is kind of collapsing. So things can get kind of rocky, and some people have had some really, myself included, have had some extremely unpleasant consequences in the course of the recovery from this. For some people, that's not the case. But we now have a pretty good body of people, a good-sized body of people, who consistently report the same results from this act, who consistently report that although what we've taken to calling the course of recovery can be long or short, and can be difficult or easy, that in the end, what happens is a vanishing of the sense of distance between you, me, and my life, a vanishing of the sense of holding life at arm's length in order that I can keep from harm, or keep from making a mistake, or keep from thinking the wrong thing, or not miss the right thing, so forth. That whole kind of antagonistic relationship with life just disappears. I call it sanity. And well, you have to have that. You have to have the experience of sanity as a human being to see the richness and the wonder and the beauty of being born human, of being in a human life. Now, as I say, we have a whole bunch of people now, thousands, literally thousands, of people who report that this is the case with them. This is what's happening with them. And that it takes just that one look, and the outcome almost is, well, I know of no exceptions. I'm assuming there are, but I know of no exceptions. Almost without exception, what ends up is satisfaction, fulfillment, an end to the antagonistic relationship with life, and beauty beyond description. So that's what I have that's what I have discovered. There are a lot of when I talk about this, and when people talk to me about it, there's a lot of things that come up that about teachings and understandings and metaphysical positions and so forth. But all of those are not of much interest to me, because from my experience, reality speaks for itself, and that once we are rid of the disease that keeps us at arm's length from our own life, reality speaks very clearly. So that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm up to.
Thank you.
And I want to bring this suggestion to everybody in the world, because it's so simple, because it takes nothing, costs nothing, you don't have to understand anything, you don't have to get rid of anything you do understand, you don't have to believe anything, you don't have to get rid of any beliefs, you just have to take this one act.
The questions that I had, you kind of already answered in terms of how this looking affects your life. The question was, in particular, how has it affected your relationship with Carla from the act?
My relationship with Carla and our relationship appeared within this, within the unfolding of what results from this act. And Carla and I met after an enormous change had happened in me as a result of this act. But in a time when I didn't fully, in fact, I couldn't even talk about what it was. I couldn't even find a way to speak to people coherently about it. Right? But Carla and I have come together in this, and I don't know if I can say we have a relationship exactly. It's
is there more harmony by both of you doing this act, or having had success in this act?
There is great harmony between Carla and I. There's nothing but harmony between us. But there's nothing but harmony between us and everything else too. It's
so in general, there's
everything's
a
good.
feeling of harmony.
You know, things are hard. Life is hard. Life can be hard. Life can be difficult. It has a lot of problems in it. But the difficulty that life presents and the problems that it presents are not a problem. And what we've found, and what a lot of other people have found, is that once the fear of life goes, because see, what I see to be the case is that the fear of life is the cause of it all. That we are afflicted with this sense that life is dangerous and a threat to me, and an ontological, existential threat to me, probably at birth. And from then on in, the entire psychology, as it develops and grows within the context of the assumption that life is out to get me. That life is a problem that needs to be solved, either to be transcended, transformed, escaped from, or, you know, got enough money to escape from. So that's part of the escape. And that fear of life is not a big thing. It's this almost unnoticeable undercurrent of disaffection, of dissatisfaction, a sense that life isn't right. There's something wrong here. It ought to be different than it is. And when that goes, the hardness of life doesn't change. Life is like anything else in the manifest universe. It is driven by cause and effect at very deep levels. So it's still hard sometimes. Still sometimes you have trouble paying the bills, or like I had a little food poisoning the other day, right? But the hardness does not happen within a context that says this is one more piece of evidence that life sucks, that there's something I got to get out of or
that makes
solve.
sense.
And once that fear is gone, once that neurotic relationship with life disappears, what we find is that our skill at being able to deal with the problems and the hardships that come in life is increased 100-fold. Because we're not working at cross purposes. We're not working on a problem as if the problem itself was just a little thing that I have to get rid of so I can take care of all the rest of this stuff and maybe someday find a way to escape or transcend or transform this nonsense.
Yeah, there's only been 2 times in my life that I've felt tremendous fear, and both times it was a fear that I was going to hurt someone else physically.
Yeah.
Other than that, I've kind of been a fearless type of character from a child, and
Well,
I haven't really had
The fear of life
bouts
isn't a
of
big
fear.
thing. It's a very small thing.
That feeling, though, of fear that I've had when it felt like I was going to, it almost felt like I was going to be overtaken by something dark.
Yeah, right.
And I really didn't want to harm anyone.
Right.
I was one of the times I was in the Army, and I actually went to the mental counseling office. But before I did that, I went to they have a room for that, and so I went to the.
Gee, they found a place for me.
But so yeah, I went to the counselor, and I ended up not having to go into work that day, and I just had to stay at home and rest. But anyway, it was this real kind of terror that isn't quite what you're talking about. What you're describing is like an anxiety, a subtle background.
The subtle background is when we are most successful at handling the presence of the fear of life. You know, like we all learn to get by, right? Like we know life sucks. Even the Buddhists say life sucks. And we know that, and it's not what it should be, and so forth. But we get by, and hope something will happen, or most of us arrive at a point of resignation, and denial is big, so that we're just kind of float on this background of this kind of froth of anxiety. But the actuality of it is huge. when it strikes us in the beginning, it's huge. The damping down of it over time is a result of our skillfulness at being able to learn to come to grips with it and learn how to say, well, I'm still here, it's not, hasn't swallowed me up yet. But the fear of being swallowed up and completely sucked into some black disaster, some black, ugly vacancy, that's how it strikes in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And it, as I say, we become effective over time at keeping it at bay so we can get through our lives. Now, some of us...
Like suppressing it or
suppressing it, denying it, yeah. And some of us, and for me too, to a certain extent, like I wasn't socialized very well. I didn't have the advantage of a childhood in which socialization happened in an effective way. Mm-hmm. I lived most of my life without any sense of any idea whatsoever as to what the right way was to live life. How do these people do it? How do you do it? I mean, it seemed to me to be just incomprehensible that people were walking around living their lives and seemingly getting along. I used to say that it felt like they were real and I wasn't. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And since then, I really thought that they knew how to do it and I didn't know how to do it, right? But mostly I felt like they were real and I wasn't. And there was big experiences of kind of black holes and things coming from time to time. But that was because my psychological indoctrination was ineffective when I was a child. Mm-hmm. I didn't acquire the necessary skills and skill sets and so forth that most people do to deal with that, because we came from a broken home and so forth. But the flare-ups of it, all right, the flare-ups of it are just flare-ups of it. They by either by hook or by crook, we find ways to deal with that and push it back down, and then there it is, just there in the background. Most of the time we just deny it. We just turn away. It's not there. We think about dying, and no, we don't want to go there. That's a really silly thing to think about. Let's stay away from that. Let's stay away from all of that.
So it's like a keeping busy to avoid having to look.
Well, and part of the keeping busy is in order to protect myself. It's a busy business to, there's stuff happening in life all the time. New sensations, new feelings, new attractions, new aversions all the time. So I have to keep my eye out all the time, most of the time. I don't anymore.
Yeah.
But that's the normal way. Oh, what's that mean? What's that? What's that? Why did I think that? What? I don't think, I need to understand better. I don't understand. I got to figure this out. I'm okay. Don't worry about it. But in the meantime, and that's the way we live our lives.
I mean, I've maybe been lucky, I don't know, but most of my life I've had a tremendous love for life, and I've seen the beauty.
Yeah, well, you're an exception.
But there's been the main challenge within that are on the days where I have to deal with anger, because some days that's the feeling that's there and it's very intense. And so along with this love for life and recognizing the beauty and the gift, there's also been this steady confrontation with my own rage that seems like something ignites it, and I've had to deal with that. And I still have to look at that when it percolates.
Yes, and I would suggest that rage is precisely the same source. It comes from the same source. It's the same thing. It's like fear and rage are very similar to one another. It's not uncommon in human history and in human reflection on the human experience to rage against life. Mm-hmm. It's part of the underlying assumption that there's something wrong with life. Why should life be this way? Mm-hmm. Why should I be caught in this life like this? Why should I be caught and trapped in this body with the certainty of my death, when I have all of this wonder, all of this beauty, all of this intelligence, and all of this consciousness? Why? And
As
that's,
if it's a punishment.
yes,
to
it must be a
curse.
punishment. And it's also true that for almost all of our history, there's never been a time when there hasn't been present a metaphysical position that holds that there's some adversarial entity somewhere. Call it Satan, call it original sin, call it whatever you want to call it, right? But that there's some adversarial entity that must be watched out for, which rages.
And as children, we are told that.
That's
time
right,
to time.
and we're told that we're told that because over the tens of thousands of years that human beings have actually been conscious enough to even consider these things, right? We've been around for longer than that, but we haven't been conscious enough to think about these things for that long. But over all that time, because in order to explain this inexplicable, seemingly stupid, antagonistic relationship between me and my life, the answer that comes to mind is not there's something wrong with me, although that often is resorted to. There's something wrong with me, but a more useful answer is that there's something out there that wants to get me, or that is polluting life itself, or is corrupting the experience of human life, or that for some reason or other I have been afflicted with a fault, a flaw that was none of my doing and that came from somebody else's wrongdoing, and these are all relationships with this underlying dissatisfaction with life. Why should it be so? Why should it be so that I shouldn't just love life without the arising of rage from time to time? So, and I think that, well, I know that this works. And really, that's why I want to do the act first before I talk about it, is because it works. And I know it works. We have a lot of, it's amazing. It still surprises me. It takes me by surprise how effective this is. And
Like
how,
the reports you get are like practical.
That's right.
Day to day.
That's right.
This is affecting
Exactly.
my day to day life. I'm
That's right.
More content.
That's exactly right. That's the difference.
Less conflict, less whatever it is that probably causes us to begin looking for truth in the first
That's
place.
right.
You know.
It's gone. And that's exactly the kind of reports. You should go to our website, to the community center, the forums there. They are amazing. They just they surprise me every time I look at the postings that come in, because they're all exactly what you're speaking of. Practical matters about how my relationship with my life has changed. My relationship with my wife, my relationship with my children, my relationship with my work, how it's changed. And precious little of any kind of, ethereal sort of reports. Precious little of that. That's what's so surprising about it.
So it must be working.
It is. It is.
And I noticed from the interview with Rick that if it's someone that has a big background in spirituality and has a lot of knowledge, then maybe there's more skepticism or more conditioning to kind of say, no, I'm just going to stay with whatever it is I've been doing.
That can happen. But people who are afflicted with a spiritual mindset, which I was one. I'm not speaking of others as if
Your own experience.
Yeah, afflicted with the spiritual consciousness and so forth. It can be very difficult for them to hear this. But the good news is that it really doesn't matter, because if they just try the act, it seems like it just has to succeed. And it also is my growing experience that if I can suggest the act just cleanly and clearly enough before any discussion of any other stuff, that people automatically try it. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's not.
And then we're in the taste and not the theory.
That's right.
Things,
Exactly. And I will say that our entire history of spiritual investigation has been driven by this, and the cases in which there have been folks who have clearly lost the fear and clearly have returned to what is called by some and by me the natural state, which, strangely enough, in the spiritual realm, that's become a very ethereal.
Sahaja samadhi.
Right. But when we return to the natural state, that the spiritual, like this happened when I was still in prison, and I had gone through. I had a long history of spiritual seeking and spiritual aspiration. And I went through about a year and a half of what I now call my so-called enlightenment, when I was in a state of pretty constant, I'd have to say bliss. Few people know bliss isn't what it sounds like, but I'd have to say bliss. And then circumstances, the natural arising of cause and effect in life, created circumstances in which that went away and left me bereft and tormented and almost going insane. And although it had left me disappointed and disenchanted with the spiritual aspiration, it left me still with this yearning, with this sense that there's got to be something to do. There's got to be some way to make life live up to its promise. And I decided that that yearning was the only problem. And that the only way I could get rid of that yearning was to find something to do in the spiritual arena that would surely fail, and in failing would take away this yearning, take away this hope, take away the idea there was anything to do, so that I could forget about that and go be an ordinary.
Like have a real failure.
Yeah, right.
Give it your all,
Right.
fail, and say,
That's
okay,
right.
now
So,
I'm done.
adios, I'm on to something else. And in trying to do that, I looked around and I decided that the spiritual teaching that seemed to me the least corrupt, and I don't mean corrupt in a kind of wrongdoing way, but the least contaminated, was what Ramana Maharshi had to say. So I decided that I would try to find, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that there was no understanding that was going to save me, that there was no insight that was going to save me, and that there was no appearance of some transcendent state that was going to save me. I knew that. That was all done dead and stinking to me. So what I was looking for was some act that I could do with all my heart, the failure of which would take away from me this false belief that there was anything could be done about human life, about my life, about my misery. And in the course of trying to do that, I got an extremely brief taste of the person feel of me, just me. I didn't know what had happened. As far as I knew, nothing had happened. As far as I knew, I had failed again. I had failed even to fail. And time went on, and as time went on, what I described to you as the reports that now come into people began happening to me. I would have circumstances arise where I would have expected the appearance of a neurotic reaction and a neurotic response to it, and that response just didn't come. And that started happening, and life started revealing itself to be satisfying and dense and interesting in a way that I'd never seen it before. That didn't require putting it into some category or another. It just required the direct experiencing of life as it constantly changes, moves, comes and goes, and so forth. When I got out, I was in a situation where people wanted me to give satsang. And although I didn't want to do satsang, I couldn't do anything else. And Carla and I started going around and meeting with people and telling them all along, I would tell them all along from the very beginning that what I'm saying isn't what I'm trying to say. But I don't know how to tell you what I really want to tell you. And for 12 years, it went like that. Little by little, I started to get a sense of what it was that I really was wanting to bring to people. But, pretty much not. And I would tell people, I don't know how to say what I want to say. I don't know how to talk to you in any vernacular outside of the vernacular of spiritual aspiration, which that particular vocabulary, won't say what I want it to say. And I believe that this has been the case of many folks over the course of our history, especially the last 5,000 years of it, who have stumbled upon reality, lost the fear of life, and then tried to be helpful to people by telling them what to do, but couldn't find a way to say it. And now we have a way to say it. And it is proving itself to be effective beyond actually what I expected. Once somebody tries it, the course is certain. And it turns out, we've had some cases. We have a guy who has become a good friend who was bipolar, manic depressive, and so extremely ill from manic depressive disorder that nothing they did would help him. So finally they decided to do ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, which I didn't even know they did that stuff anymore.
Shock treatment?
Yeah, but apparently that for manic depressive states, that sometimes is a course of last resort that almost always works, almost without exception works. Not entirely without exception, and he was one of the exceptions. And in the case of the exceptions, they get worse. And then he came upon me in the looking, and he, it's all gone. All gone. So, what I want to do is I want to bring this idea to everybody. I don't need to convince people that it works. I don't want to convince anybody. I don't want to talk them into it. I just want to suggest to everybody that I can get within range of my voice that they just try, just once, to get a direct, immediate experiential taste of the feeling of me, just me, and see what happens. And, well, that's all. Everything else comes and goes.
But I am looking.
That's beside the point. That's just yes, you are looking. You're using a tool which is you have,
Yes,
which is the power to focus attention and put it where you want to go. Now that's indisputable that you can do that. And because of the fact that where you're trying to put your attention is on the direct experience of you, it's a very unnatural act to take. It's not something that attention is intended to do. Attention is intended to protect you and to give you the opportunity to get the good things that may become available to you. That's what attention's for, outward. But what comes of this is not an insight or an understanding or any kind of rising experience. Mm-hmm. It's much more effective and much more useful to think of the looking as medicine. in this way, and I mean that literally. If you get sick, like, you get sick, you get some infection or whatever, you go to the doctor, you don't know what's making you sick. You may, to some degree or not, but you don't know the deep detail of what's happening within your body that produces the symptoms that you want to get rid of. You just know you're sick. You go to the doctor. The doctor examines you, does tests and so forth, and gives you antibiotics. He says, take these antibiotics for however long he wants you to take them until it run out, and everything will be okay. So you start taking the antibiotics. Now, when you take the antibiotics, it doesn't give you any relief from anything. There's no, like, you take the pill and then, I feel better already, right? You just take the pill. You have no idea what's happening within your physiology, the war that's being fought there, the slaughter that's happening to the microorganisms and stuff as the poisonous antibiotics are attacking them. You're not aware of that. That's way beneath your level of awareness. All that's still going on. You're still sick. And you keep taking the antibiotics, and little by little, the sickness starts to go away. You have no idea what happened. It wasn't because you took the antibiotics and it gave you a new insight into understanding into disease. It wasn't because you took them and they produced some experience of relief and so forth. It was for reasons that are not clear, that are below the level of ordinary conscious awareness. But you still got better. It's the same with the looking. The disease here is this underlying fear of life, this underlying antagonistic relationship with life, in which we feel the need to interrogate everything that comes in, every idea, every thought, every all of that. We have to interrogate everything. That's the disease. That's what spoils life, that endless need to do that. That's what spoils life. The medicine is the looking. You look, and if you have looked, you will look again. That's one of the signs that success has occurred. Because some people do it and keep looking even while they complain that the looking's doing no good. Until at the other end they come out and report, well, actually turned out it was okay. So that's the way to look at this. This isn't going to produce any insights or understandings. Sanity serves insight and understanding. To go sane makes insight and understanding much more accessible and valid and interesting. But this doesn't produce any insight. This doesn't produce any understanding. It doesn't produce any altered state of any kind.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to stress for myself to actually understand that it's not for the result of anything.
It's just medicine.
Yeah, it's not to get somewhere, because my suffering was, my confusion was that I was trying to get somewhere. It was very subtle. It was like I realized that it was just looking for sort of another experience. That's why I'm asking you how it is for you. Because for me it's just very, Thank you. So you just suggest to believe you and just have a look.
Yes, right, because it doesn't cost you anything.
Yes.
Can't hurt you. It's not like I'm asking you to do something that can hurt you.
Right.
So that's exactly the case.